Washington Post's Sudarsan Raghavan has been covering the conflict on the ground for us. Sudarsan, thank you so much for joining us. First off, where you are in Kyiv, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Hi, glad to be with you. Yes, I'm in the center of Kyiv, and today basically the streets are pretty much extremely empty. People are either inside their homes or staying inside subway stations, where many people have camped out in empty subway cars. At the train station, thousands of people are trying to leave today. Many of them have arrived with their families, children, elderly, trying to get on a train. Most of them appear to be going west towards the city of Lviv and the Polish border. There's there's a sense here that the noose is tightening on the city, and many people are, especially after last night's, there was a bombardment last night, and even throughout the day today, there's been explosions around the city. People are getting extremely worried.
Yeah, and that's the question that I have for you, Sudarsan, because we saw images of that television tower exploding. We've also seen images of people driving their cars or walking through the streets when there is a bombardment or a missile attack. So are people now hunkering down even more than they already were? Because just, I think 2 days ago, our Charlie D'Agata was in a supermarket, and he said that people were buying supplies. They weren't panic buying, but they were still buying food.
Right. They had lifted the curfew at that point, but then it's amazing how much has changed in really just a day.
Yeah.
Right. Look, there's still people out there trying to stock up. I went to one supermarket today, and there's certainly a handful of people inside, but not the long lines that we saw yesterday and maybe the day before. People are, they have to do what they have to do. Some people are waiting in gas lines trying to fill up their cars. Others are trying to get bread. But it's look. I mean, it's definitely more tense than it was. The feeling is more tense. The city is more tense than it was yesterday and the day before. People are also extremely concerned, with all the reports coming out. There was a report last night from that the Russians were going to be bombing a secret service building, which is in the heart of the city, actually not too far from the hotel where we're at. And there were other, the mayor himself has said that the city is getting increasingly surrounded by Russian forces. So all these are playing into people's minds and calculations, and that's why you've seen this, a huge rush today to get on trains.
Yeah, I can imagine that a lot of the people that are rushing out now didn't rush out before. They saw the traffic jams. They thought, you know what, it's going to be safe in Kyiv. I'm wondering if you've been able to talk to people about how they feel about the reaction of the rest of the world. There is a lot of support, but I wonder, thoughts and prayers and sort of flying the Ukrainian flag is one thing, but I'm sure they want concrete support. How are they feeling about the way the world is reacting to this?
No, definitely. I mean, just less than an hour ago, I was at a checkpoint, and one of the civilian members of one of these civilian militias, known as the Territorial Defense Units, saw that I was an American, and the first thing he said was, send a message. We need an air defense system. We need more support from the U.S. So there's definitely a sense here, a hope that the international community, particularly the United States, will get a lot more involved and send much more weaponry to deal with the Russian threat. At the same time, there is a sense of a resilience. The President Zelensky himself has come out and saying, look, we can't depend on anyone else. We can only depend on ourselves to protect our homeland. So people have, they've started to join these civilian defense units. Others are helping by making food for the troops. Everyone's kind of doing their part. Even as you're seeing tens of thousands of people fleeing the city, tens of thousands more are signing up to fight the Russians. There's definitely a sense of resilience and determination amongst Ukrainians to protect their own motherland.
The question, of course, Sudarsan, is what happens when Vladimir Putin employs the same tactics and strategies that we've seen him employ with his troops in Syria, in Chechnya, Up until this moment, there's perhaps an impression that the Russians thought that they were just going to march in to Kyiv, perhaps isolate President Zelensky, install a puppet government, and very little bloodshed, or at least minimal bloodshed. But now that the Ukrainians are fighting back, now that Russia finds itself as a pariah state, we know what Vladimir Putin is capable of. And he's a very, very dangerous dictator. So the notion that the Ukrainians, as brave and inspirational as they are, could withstand a sustained Russian onslaught is something that I don't think we're prepared to see yet. So what are the Ukrainians saying about that possibility?
Right. Look, one reason, a key reason why many people were fleeing this morning is because they're seeing what's happening in Kharkiv. They're seeing how the Russians are bombing, government buildings and other, sites in the city there, which is, Ukraine's second largest. Their big concern, of course, is something very similar happening to Kyiv. The attack yesterday on the television tower, which killed 5 people and injured 5 others, is pretty much in the not too far from the heart of the city, in a bit of a residential area that a lot of that people are really concerned that more such attacks could happen in the center. So yes, definitely. Look, they are brave, they are resilient, but you're right. If there's a blitzkrieg here happening in the city, if Vladimir Putin does exactly what he did in Syria or in Grozny or the Russians, it's going to be, I think a lot of Ukrainians are, could be, trying to get out as quickly as possible. There might be less of that. That's why they're really hoping for assistance from the international community. The other day I was up on this highway, which is northward facing, and the Russian troops were only, believed, about 15 to 16 miles away down the road, and the Ukrainians there were positioning, heavy anti-tank rockets, anti-aircraft guns. They had armored personnel carriers with cannons on it, and behind them in a building, they were making hundreds of Molotov cocktails. So, these guys are waiting for the Russians to enter the capital, and they are planning to resist. But if there's going to be massive airstrikes like what we're seeing in Kharkiv, it could definitely sort of change the picture on the ground and certainly in the minds of many Ukrainians.
All right, Sudarsan, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay safe out there, and thank you for all the reporting and the work that you're doing. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.